You're listening to Parasearch Radio, news, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. Parasearch UK Radio. Parasearch Radio, broadcasting to the UK and beyond.
The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch Radio or its affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to Haunted Histories with your host Penny G. Morgan, right here on Parasearch Radio.
Hello everyone, how are we? It's Haunted Histories time. Now, I've got an apology to make. You may notice tonight that I'm a little bit, quiet come non-existent in the chat room. That's because I'm not actually here today. It's nothing actually anything paranormal or weird or whatever, but the celebratory shout out is actually for me tonight, as it's my 10th wedding anniversary, and I thought I actually better spend time with my husband tonight rather than chatting to you lovely lot on the radio. So, happy anniversary to me! Well, a little bit later, we are going to be talking with Mr. Lee Roberts, all about the village near Mansfield. And so, with its links to Newstead Abbey, which actually eventually became the home of the Byron family, including the poet and, shall we say, playboy, one Lord Byron. I thought that tonight's history lesson could be giving a very, very quick, brief look on the dissolution, or at the dissolution, of the monasteries, the Reformation. What do you think? Well, it's actually not really up to you, because I've already done the recording of this, so have a listen. It's quite cool. But where do we start? I think with the serial bridal groom himself, Mr. King Henry VIII. The story goes, in fact the one that most school children are taught, is that because the Catholic Church wouldn't grant this Tudor redhead a divorce, that he decided to create his own church with himself as the lead, the Church of England. This led to the 1534 Act of Supremacy, which gave the role of supreme lead to Henry. It was following that the monasteries and religious houses of England began to be seized. Now, many people believe that all this sort of commotion was actually to do with the fact that Henry wanted the Church of England to be dominant, and whilst I do agree that might have been part of it, what I also think is, from reading some of the research that I found, that as ever, religion was used as an excuse for something. Now, think about how wealthy the Catholic Church was, and still is, if we're honest, and that Henry and his advisor, Thomas Cromwell, as a name we've mentioned before, had 2 acts passed, the first and second acts of succession, which the first act said that any religious house with less than £200 per annum in income had to give their lands and wealth to the Crown. The second act was for those with more than £200 a year. Now, giving their land and wealth doesn't mean that the church itself is going to stop operating. It just means that the king's coffers are going to have a lot more money in them. So, was the dissolution of the monasteries just purely down to religion? Or was it robbery? Daylight robbery? Who knows? But to find out who had what, Cromwell and his lackeys had undergone something called a valor ecclesiasticus, which basically meant doing an audit on all of these monasteries, churches and religious houses. Those that refused to comply, or even refused to leave their house of worship, were executed and their properties destroyed. I remember when I was younger I visited Fountains Abbey, in Yorkshire, and I went on a really, really good tour of it. And the guide pointed out this sort of stone pillar and said, could you see the sort of cut marks in it? And when she pointed them out, they were actually quite easy to notice. And she told me that that was where the abbot of Fountains Abbey was hacked to death when he refused to give up his beautiful building, which is now a ruins. Something in the region of 800 monasteries or more and religious houses were destroyed in the space of 4 years, with the land either being sold off to families who were, shall we say, sympathetic to Henry's cause, or the buildings were basically, the land itself was left as it was, and the buildings were ransacked for materials and their wealth. Excuse me. Some members of religious orders actually chose exile. Others offered resistance to the changes. When the Carthusian monks refused to take the oath of supremacy, i.e. that Henry was the out-and-out leader, and recognising him as the head of the church, several were hung, drawn and quartered, while others just disappeared into prisons and were starved to death. Those that played ball were given their lives and a pension. But many, and this happened to the nuns as well, it wasn't just the monks, Elizabeth Throckmorton, who was the abbess of the Poor Clares. Remember we mentioned them last week when we were talking about Queen Elizabeth and Castle Rising. If you didn't hear that show, don't worry. It's still there, you can still listen to it. Good show, I say so myself. Anyway, she was based at Denny in Cambridgeshire. And after the closure of her convent, she, like a lot of other nuns, returned to her family. At her nephew's house in Cofton Court in Warwickshire, she and several others lived in an upper room, wore their habits, and continued their conventual life. Which, to me, just reaffirms the fact it wasn't necessarily just the destruction of the Catholic faith that Henry was after. It was more, shall we say, more see-through than that. He wanted their money. He wanted their wealth. He'd spent too much, basically, and he needed to raise funds. But before we talk to Lee, I actually want to mention just a very brief, interesting fact that I found out. Now, who knows this nursery rhyme? Little Jack Horner sat in a corner, eating a Christmas pie. He put in his thumb and pulled out a plum, and said, "What a good boy am I." You might think I'm going nuts giving you children's nursery rhymes. I'm not. There is a connection, I promise. It's actually believed to be to do with the dissolution of the monasteries. It's true, Dat. The story goes that Thomas Horner was steward to a Richard Whiting, the last abbot of Glastonbury. Prior to the abbey's destruction, the abbey is said to have sent Horner to London with a huge Christmas pie, which had the deeds to a dozen manors hidden within it. Apparently, during the journey, Horner opened the pie and stole the deeds of the manor of Mells in Somerset. The manor properties included lead mines, and it suggested that the plum in the rhyme is a pun on the Latin plumbum, for lead. Records confirm that a Thomas Horner did indeed become the owner of the manor. How there is nothing to confirm this actual legend. But it's interesting, no? It could fit. Shall we get on to talking to Lee now and talk a bit about the village and its links to Newstead Abbey and some monks who were possibly murdered during the Reformation? You ready? And now, my next guest is someone that a lot of you've probably seen on television. You may have seen him on the Halloween special of Tattoo Fixers when he got a very, very, I'd say, beautiful piece of work done by Mr. Old Blue Eyes himself, Jay. Or you may have seen him on Haunted Live on Facebook, which he runs with Paul Stevenson from Haunted Magazine. Or you may even have been on one of his events, Haunted Events UK, and some of the very unique places they get to go to. Or you may just simply know him as Mr. Lee Roberts. Hi Lee, how are you?
Hello, thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure, it's a pleasure. Thank you ever so much for coming on the show.
Okay.
We're going to be talking about the village in Mansfield shortly. But before we do, I mean, I've read your bio on your website because, it's what you do when you're doing these shows, isn't it? You do your preparation as best as you can. But for those who haven't, how did you get into being a paranormal investigator? I mean, you work now as a full-time paranormal investigator, like the dream job probably for most people who have a hobby in paranormal. How did you get into it in the first place?
Well, like I say, I'm very lucky to be able to work full-time looking after several locations. But my first experience was actually at one of the locations that I work at now. It's Newstead Abbey. And I was a 6-year-old schoolboy going on a school trip around Newstead Abbey, which is in Ravenshead in Mansfield. And as we was walking around, they was telling us all the stories of Lord Byron that used to live there, and obviously the monks when it was an abbey. They was telling us all the history and all the poems that Lord Byron wrote. And as we got up towards Lord Byron's bedroom, we went into the room next door to Lord Byron's bedroom, and it was where one of the servants used to live, and she was besotted by Lord Byron, and he told us the story of this little maid called Sophie that was besotted with Lord Byron. As he was leaving to go to a war at one point, she ran out onto the courtyard and was trampled by his horse and cart and was killed tragically. And that was the legend of the White Lady. So they always say that this White Lady is seen in this room and in the windows of this room. Now, incidentally, this room was also where the monks used to go for their final days. So when they was passing or ill, they used to take them up to this room and put them in a bed, open the windows. So it was the highest point in Newstead Abbey, and they thought that they was closer to heaven, closer to God, and they could also hear the church services from across the road on the church and the bells going and the choirs. So that's where a lot of monks passed away as well. So it's kind of very historically kind of got a lot of death in there. It's got a lot of history in there. Now, so when we was in there, my best friend who was next to me, bearing in mind we're 6 years old, he suddenly passed out, and we quickly got him round. The teachers went and picked him up and said, "Is he okay?" And he said he felt as if there was a cloak being put over his shoulders and that he was being dragged down to the floor, and then he just lost consciousness. He went. So there was probably about 20 of us in there, 26 years old, 6-year-olds. So you can imagine the mayhem that was going on in there. We tried to get out the room, and the door was locked. And the tour guide, I overheard the tour guide say to my teacher that this never happens. This door doesn't lock, and we was actually trapped in there for 20 minutes. Well, 20 minutes doesn't seem too long, but as a 6-year-old. 20 minutes is a long time to have 26-year-olds trapped in there.
I'm sure the teacher felt it was an eternity.
Yeah, well, that's it. I think the teacher felt it a little bit more than us. But eventually, when we did get out, we carried on with the tour. I thought it was amazing. It was fantastic. I thought it was just one big adventure. It was crazy. Now, we got back, and the school teacher was like, right, you need to draw a picture of the Abbey and draw a picture of Lord Byron and maybe write a poem. And I filled a whole school book of ghost stories because I was infatuated with this story of the White Lady and the ghosts of Newstead Abbey.
Yeah. And
from that point onwards, I was absolutely hooked. So when we was going in the playground and all my mates was going, "Oh, let's play army, let's go around shooting each other, blah, blah, blah," I was, well, let's play Ghostbusters. Let's be Ghostbusters. Let's go and hunt ghosts, and let's go around the school and see what we can do around the school. And from that point on, I was hooked on paranormal. And then when I turned 18, I decided, right, we need to kind of look at this a little bit further. And I just went out there, got myself a camera and an old video camera. And you can imagine back then, kind of 94ish. It was a big video camera. And I went out there to try and investigate, and that's what I've done since, really, and just built on that.
So, would you class yourself as a sensitive then? Do you see things and feel things, or?
I used to when I was younger. So one of the other experiences I had around the same time when I was 6 years old, I saw a little boy on my mum and dad's landing. So as I got to go to the toilet, there was a little boy sat there,
Mhm.
And I always bring this up when I'm talking about my first experiences. And I've always been told by my parents that I was dreaming. They can always remember it. I was dreaming
Mhm.
at the time, but I know I wasn't. I wasn't
Mhm.
dreaming. And I know for a fact, and I can still picture him now. I can still describe what he looked like, what he was wearing, exactly where he was in my parents' house. And I know for a fact that I saw a ghost. Um, so I think I was very aware when I was younger, like
Mm.
most children are,
Children.
I
Yeah.
think. Yeah,
Yeah.
but as I got older, it kind of closed off.
Mhm.
And now and again, I can walk in a room and kind of the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, and I can sense that there's something there.
Mm.
But I think a lot of the time, I think just being kind of more scientific minded and being a little bit probably stubborn in a way, where I don't trust it as
Yeah.
much as what I should do, really,
Yeah.
because I want solid proof, not just, well, I'm feeling a bit funny in this room. I
Yeah.
want
Yeah.
solid proof. So I think I close it off a little bit too much
Yeah.
rather than kind of embracing it.
Yeah. I think what you said about children though is very, very true, and what the parents do tend to say to them is something I was talking about when I did the Halsham House show
Yeah.
recently, that a lot of parents, the minute their child says they're experiencing something or they've seen something, it's like, oh, no, 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 it's not real, you're imagining it. But I mean,
Yeah.
my mum used to say that to myself and my late sister. We frequently used to see a shadow figure walk
Yeah.
up. If we were looking out of our living room through the glass door, we'd see a shadow figure walk through the hall and up the stairs. And my sister and I both saw it on more than, well, quite a few. And there was nobody else it could have been. Our dad was away. The rest of the family are all in the same room.
Mm.
And it was a shadow of a person just walking past the door. And so my sister and I both used to see it. And when we first told my mum, she was, oh, don't be silly, no, there's no such thing. But her and I both saw it on
Yeah.
a few occasions. And subsequent, even though my parents' house is only it's not an old one, it's 1960s, I think, but it's in the middle of nowhere, we found out that one of the first ever Methodist churches had been built on the grounds that my parents' house now stands. It was a wooden Methodist church. So, there's as we're going to talk about with the village in a second.
Yeah.
You can have a lot of things that are still almost in the ground, even though that's not what's on top of them. If that
Yeah,
makes
that's
sense.
right. Yeah, I mean,
kind of know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the layers of what's been there in the past. It's not just what we're. If we went to, so for instance, I live in a new build, so even if I did an investigation here, and I did it thoroughly, I am sure I would pick up on something or get some bit of evidence, because it's not just I'm not just investigating my house, or maybe I'm not investigating what was here before my house, but what was here before that and before that, before that. There's layers of energy that's there. And also, and we've just spoke off there with spirits can move, and travel about. So, I always, when somebody says, so if we've got a new investigation or a new location, we say, oh, we're going to do an investigation there, and the first question they go is, why is it haunted? Well, in my view, it's everywhere is haunted, because if there are spirits or ghosts, they'll go everywhere and anywhere.
Yep.
So everywhere is haunted. It's just a case of bringing the right energies, doing the right experiments.
Yep, I agree. I mean, one of the investigations I've got coming up in March is at a place called Strangers Hall in Norwich. And this building, they'd never done an investigation there before, and I suggested it to some friends of mine who run a group because they were looking for some new locations in Norwich. And it sold out within about 3 weeks or something ridiculous. But the building itself is about 500 years old, plus it's a social history museum, so it's full of loads and loads of different artefacts. Now, they don't know if it's haunted or not, but my guess would be there's something in there. There's so much propensity for it. Age of the building, Norwich's history, all the items that things could... But how do you know if you don't try? And there's not always logic. I mean, Kelvedon Hatch nuclear bunker in Essex. It's only... Well, it was built in 1952. Nobody died making it. Nobody... there was never a nuclear war. Thank God. So it's never been... But... it's got an awful lot of activity there, and it's why would somewhere that so I agree with you. I do think everywhere has the potential for something to be happening there. It's just sometimes it's a bit more energetic than other places.
That's right.
My husband always accuses me of bringing stuff home with me. He said you bring the waifs and strays home with you, because he said he reckons things happen as soon whenever I've done an investigation. He said something. You seem to. I said I don't think I would bring anything home. It's just the energy levels are different. But
but again, you're aware that you've been on a ghost hunt or an investigation.
Yeah.
So therefore, your mind's going to be trained to be open while you're doing that.
Yeah.
So you are going to experience things, and your partner is going to do exactly the same. They know that you've been on a ghost hunt. You're going to come home. Their mind subconsciously is going to be open to, or things are going to happen now. So things will happen because you're subconsciously open to it.
Yeah.
You know, it's just a full circle of, well, this is how your brain works, so you will do.
Although I enjoy it a bit more than he does. He wakes up in the middle of the night screaming because he swears there's someone standing at the end of the bed, and I have to discreetly ask them to go away. I think I have more fun out of it than he does. But anyway, so you also did quite a publicised investigation at a place called Clifton Hall.
Yes.
What was that all about?
So Clifton Hall, we was contacted by Anwar Rashid, who was the owner of the building at the time, and he lived in part of the building with his family. They purchased the hall with a view of, let's do it all up and make it into a wedding venue. And it was a grand hall. It was an amazing hall, and they renovated the whole building. And literally renovated it into this really, really nice top of the range wedding venue. And while they was renovating, which is another cause of releasing energy, I believe, a lot of the cleaners and a lot of the security there at the time was reporting shadowy figures. They was reporting things touching them, pushing them. And one of the rooms was reported that it was full of wasps all the time, which I found really weird. So anyway, we went there back in 2007, and we agreed that we would spend 3 nights at Clifton Hall on our own there, myself and my team. The family would move out 3 nights. We would have the whole place to ourselves. And the first walk around that we did with Anwar Rashid and his family, we went onto the top floor and walked into one room, and the whole room was full, top to bottom, with wasps. You couldn't even see the floor. It was crazy. So I turned to Anwar and said, is this the room that you always see wasps? He said, yeah. So I said, right, come on, let's go and get the camera. So we all went downstairs, got the equipment, came back upstairs, and as we walked into the room, not one wasp in sight, completely vanished. And it was literally a 2-3 minute break of going to get the equipment, and there was not one wasp inside. Now, we had people come around and check. There was no wasp nests. There was no windows open. There was no way to get out, and there was nothing there to suggest why there was these hundreds and thousands of wasps in this room. And they didn't escape to go in any other room or even out into the corridor where this room led to. So that was our first bit of investigation there. But the play, we did 3 nights there in 2007, and it was an active location. It was probably as active as what I've ever experienced before. But eventually we left. 3 nights, went away from it and left it. And it wasn't until a year later that I contacted Anwar Rashid and said, how are things going? And he said, well, I'm glad you've got in touch with me because things have just started to get worse. And he was reporting that they've got a newborn baby in the house, and the baby had, on one night, it had a feather placed on its forehead when they woke up. Now, I put it down to had they got a feather pillow or, it could have come from anywhere. Yeah. But then the second night, there was blood spots on the baby, and they checked the baby, and there was no cuts on the gums, no cuts on the hands, no kind of anything around, but there was little blood spots around on the forehead again. Which was strange. So we spent another 3 nights there in 2008, and it was exactly a year to the day that we did the first investigations.
Yeah.
And I always describe it as the Twilight Zone because you could walk along a corridor. We literally walked along a corridor in there, came out the other side, and we was at the beginning of the corridor again. It was weird. It played with your mind. It played with your subconscious, and it was just, I cannot explain the how things happen in there. We got voices coming through on our radio. The first time we went in there, 2007, we got a voice that said, "We know you're alone in there," on the radio. Now, we checked baby monitors on local housing, we checked kind of local radio stations, that it was just a normal handheld walkie-talkie radio. So we got that on film. We looked at this voice. It was a female voice that said, "We know you're alone in there." So we left it as unexplained. A year later, when we went back in 2008, as we were walking around, we got into the same room, and the radio sounded off again, and it said, "So you've come back again." Same voice a year later. Nobody else in the room, in the house, except for 3 guys, myself, my brother-in-law, and my uncle, that was walking around the property. Same voice a year later, directing something at us, and we was on a different channel on the radio. In fact, it was brand new radio, so it was completely different. So where did that voice come from? We don't know where that. We still don't know to this day where this voice come from. And we looked at it thoroughly. We looked at baby monitors. We looked at maybe taxi drivers, pizza delivery. We were running them all up to see if anybody is kind of using the same kind of radio that we're on the same kind of channel. Yeah, frequencies. And there was nothing. And we didn't publicise that we was there. There was nothing in the public eye until it didn't come to light until the October. So we went in there in August. Of both years, and then in October, I had a phone call from Anwar Rashid, and he explained that he and his family are moving out. They can't cope with the activity anymore. His wife is scared to death. His families are not prepared to live there anymore. So they just handed the keys back to the bank, and it still is the highest repossession in Europe. £3.5 million mansion, and he just gave it up and gave the keys back to the bank. And it is still the highest, because obviously he left and he didn't pay any more mortgage from that day onwards, and he just gave the keys back. So it was the highest, the most expensive repossession in Europe.
So
and that.
Sorry,
yeah,
go
so,
on.
So it was left, and it was left for many years. Kind of not lived in. So this was 2008. And it wasn't lived in until 2012, where the current owner has bought half of the property, and half of the property is still empty. And the current owner is still in there. I have regular contact with him. He is a non-believer. He has had no experience of any paranormal activity. He's an artist. He uses most of the room as gallery and space to keep his paintings. And he has not one bit of activity in there at all, but he gets inundated daily by ghost hunters and people asking him if the place is haunted and whether they can come and have a look in the property. But he refuses everybody. I have been in there, luckily, and had a little walk around with him, just to tell him what we picked up on. He was intrigued on what we did find, but yeah, he's still lived into this day now by this guy, this painter. And he doesn't experience anything, strangely enough.
Did you look into the history of the place?
So the property. I mean, I'm not too. That's one of not my forte really, the history of things. But it was.
Hello, I can help.
Yeah, I'll leave that to you. It was a school at one point that was there, and before that, the Clifton family owned that. We know that at the back there is a kind of a cliff that drops down to the River Trent, and we know that there is a story of one of this original family that lived there did fall off of the cliff to her death to the River Trent. We don't know whether that was a suicide or whether that was kind of accidental or even
murder.
Murder. We don't know that, but so that's as far as I've got into it. But the Rashid family had obviously already done a little bit of investigation work before I arrived on the scene, because when I got there was, so that the roof, that you can imagine, the roofs of each room was very, very high in this grand hall, and in each corner of the room was a prayer, a Buddhist prayer that was nailed into the wall with these big thick nails. And he said he'd had a priest come round and bless the property and nailed these prayers into the walls. Obviously didn't work because then obviously I took over and did investigations there. So yeah, it really, really weird, spooky place.
But it sounds to me, I mean, it sounds absolutely fascinating, and it doesn't actually surprise me that a non-believer's not experiencing anything, because there might be stuff going on, but they don't believe it, so they're not seeing it. I've experienced that before with people.
He's completely closed off from it.
Yeah.
He's a complete non-believer. He thinks it's all nonsense.
Yeah.
He's not having any of it.
Yeah. But it doesn't sound to me like, I mean, the wasps is a bit weird, but the stuff that was happening, I mean, the feather on a baby's forehead is actually quite symbolic as being a sort of a nice protection type thing. So it doesn't sound like the activity was particularly nasty.
No.
So maybe that's why the prayers didn't work, because there was nothing nefarious.
There was no one ever hurt in there.
No.
Even when we was doing investigations, there was no one ever hurt in there. It was very emotional at times. And people felt very, very emotional, and people in my team saw things that they came over in all emotion and started crying. But there was no one ever physically hurt in there in any way, shape, or form. Even the Rashid family that was there, it wasn't. I think they was more scared of the lack of understanding, rather than it being kind of a poltergeist or anything that was going to harm them in any.
Hurt them,
It was more lack of understanding that made them move, and because they moved and it was the most expensive repossession, that's what got the headlines for them and made it such an iconic story now that a lot of people know about.
You've piqued my interest now. I'm going to do some research on it. I'm going to have to, because you made me think, oh, that's quite an interesting. I'm going to do some research on that one.
Clifton Hall is worth a show in itself, because you can talk for days of things that happen in there.
Yeah, definitely.
And because it's such a huge place, and we spent so many nights in there going through, and it wasn't just one thing.
Yeah.
Normally you go on an investigation and one thing spikes your interest that you talk about for months and months. This was like every hour that we spent there was something new happening. That was completely throw us off as rail of what we was doing, and we would have to stop everything and investigate this new activity that was happening.
Sure.
It's crazy.
You've just talked yourself into a third show with me now.
That's three. We'll see if we can get any more as we're going along the show.
Well, some of the other, with your company Haunted Events UK, some of the places that you manage, you obviously manage the village, which we're going to talk about shortly, but you also manage Newstead Abbey, which was where you had your first ever experience as a little boy, which actually has got links to the village, which we're going to talk about in a minute, because that's actually quite spooky. I think the links, the fact that your experience was at Newstead and now you're known for managing the village. You've also got is it the Brew House? At Nottingham Castle.
Yeah, which is the old slums.
Yep. You also do Sherwood Forest.
Yep.
But you also do one that's been on the big screen, don't you?
Yeah, Woolerton Hall, which is Woolerton Hall is my flagship, really, for my events company. It's the location that I've worked there the longest. So I started running events there back in 2006. And we still run events there today. So it sat up on a hill in Nottinghamshire, and it was built in 1588.
What was filmed there?
So it was recently, well, not recently, it was 2011. It was Batman: The Dark Knight Rises was filmed. So Woolerton Hall is actually Wayne Manor was filmed there.
So did you get to meet Christian Bale?
I didn't. No, I stayed away. To be fair, there was in complete lockdown, so they had the place to themselves, and it was but it was really good to see. So I did see a lot of the setup and the way they worked it, and the way they had to reinforce a lot of the cellars that was underneath, because of the big trucks that was coming on to deliver all the set. They had to reinforce all the cave system and all the cellars underneath because of these trucks. The floor started going in. So that was good to see.
But Bruce Wayne didn't let you into his back cave.
Bruce Wayne didn't let me. I've been in there many times afterwards, but now he's vacated the property. Well, another little bit of a history about Woolerton Hall Well, Woollerton Hall is one of 7 properties that was built, all at the similar time, that was a carbon copy of each other. Now, Woollerton was the original, and then we have 7 around the country that are carbon copies of Woollerton Hall. They all face in exactly the same direction, and one of them is the place where they filmed Downton Abbey. That is basically a carbon copy of Woollerton Hall, is where they filmed Downton Abbey. Now, there is apparently, I've been told, there's a very spiritual reason for why they did that. I don't really know. This is the 4th show I'm going to talk into. So it was very, it was a very kind of spiritual reason why they did that. 7 properties, all facing the same way, all kind of segregated all the way around in the UK, and they all look exactly the same from the outside. They look the same. Which is what I find really strange.
That is very strange. And you say Woollerton was built in 1580...
1588 was
1588. So during Queen Elizabeth's reign.
Yeah, it was built by the Middleton family, and the Willoughbys lived there at one point as well, which I'll let you research for that.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Do you know what? I love doing this show. I do love doing this show, but my bucket list of places I want to visit gets bigger and bigger. And because I can't just say I'm going to go and visit this, I have to look up things as well. It's the researcher history person in me. And I say, my husband goes, "You do realise you have got a job?" Yeah, I know, but you never know. You never know. So one of the things we were talking about off air is the fact that the only of the locations that you book out frequently is the village. Yeah. But you mentioned that you do like to have breaks in when, I mean, these other sort of locations are only used, say, twice a year, so they're very special. They're not overused. They're not sort of, you know that you're going to sell the tickets, basically. I know it sounds very businesslike, but you know you're going to sell them because they're so rarely invested. It's a bit like if someone said they're going to do an investigation at Alcatraz, it would sell out. That's right. It's a
one-off kind of thing. Yeah.
But you like to have breaks with the places that you. Why do you? Surely you just want to book them out as much as possible.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it people say exactly what you've just said there. Business-wise, it's good sense, because I know that I put an event on and it gets sold out within minutes. It will get sold out because people are chomping at the bit to get in these locations. And the only exception to that is the village, which we hire out to other companies, and we hire it out on a weekly basis, and we've been inundated. But even with the village, I purposely put a break in there. So we have August, we don't have any investigations, and December, we don't have any investigations. Right. So I put that break in there purposely. And my theory on that is there are locations, and I will name one, Galleries of Justice, for instance, in Nottinghamshire, that has been done, excuse the pun, to the death. Week in, week out, hundreds of people coming and investigating these properties. And if you look back in 2003, when Most Haunted was at its peak, and
did you just swear then? You just swore then, didn't you?
Sorry, I apologise for that.
Adult content warning.
We do apologise. Let's see, that could be a whole new show. Now,
6?
Yeah. So when that show, I'm not going to say them again. When that show arrived at the Galleries of Justice, it peaked. And people wanted to go there, and the activity there was amazing. It was probably on par with what the village is at this point now. It was up there as one of the best in the country of paranormal investigations of where everybody wanted to go. But over the years, you look at reports now of people going to the Galleries of Justice, you might get 1 in every 10 people that will come away from there and go, something happened. But most people will go, I didn't really get much. I was a little bit disappointed with the amount of activity because of the hype that place has got. Yeah. Now, I put it down to, and we spoke off there about it.
We did.
My theory on it is that if using energy, we let these spirits do whatever they want to do and move around and come and use evidence, come and use activity and give us evidence. Now, they're going to have to use that energy. So as a living person, if I run a half marathon twice a week, every single week, until, and I'm booked in that until 2019, as the same as the village is booked up until 2019. So I do that. At some point, my body is going to turn off and go, Mark, no matter how much energy you're giving me and how much fuel you're putting into this body, I literally can't do this anymore. I need a break. I can't do it. Now, I'm very much into my boxing. So when I'm in fight camp, I can do 8 weeks worth of really heavy training.
Yeah.
And after 8 weeks, after the fight, that is it. I will have a good couple of months off and have a break and binge out because I need it. My body needs it.
Yeah.
And I put that down to the same as spirits. So if the spirits are there and they're using energy every week, people are coming, different people, different energies, using it. Eventually, them spirits are going to go, hang on a minute, we need to recharge our own spiritual energy. We need to recharge the batteries so then we can come back. And that's not just a theory. That goes on from what I've experienced over the years and I use village as an example. When we first went into the village and started hiring that out, the activity spiked and it was bonkers in there, really, really, really kind of active. As we got so we started hiring it out in November 2015.
Right.
As we got to around June, July time, you could see that people was coming and not getting as much activity. You still got a little bit, but it wasn't as epic as what some investigations had been. So I purposely put a break in August. I said, right, we're not going to do anything through the summer. It worked for me because the summer holidays, I've got the children. I didn't want to be at the village every weekend. I want to go on holiday. Most other people want to go on holiday. So it was a natural break.
Yeah.
We came back in September and the activity there was as good as it had ever been there. It was off the scale again.
Yeah.
So I thought, right, that's good, and I've experienced this with the other locations that we use. So in December I did it again, another little break, and we thought, right, it's over Christmas, everyone wants to come on a ghost hunt. Let's have a break from the 1st of December right through till January. So we had another break that we put in there. Came back in January, and again it was one of the best investigations we ever had on the first one back. So that was a conscious decision that I decided from that point we would have at the village breaks in August and December to give people and to give spirits that chance to recharge, redevelop, re-look at the village, and then come back all guns blazing. And it's worked, and we've just come back from a break, so we've had probably 3 investigations since the Christmas break, and they've all been really, really good active locations. And compare that to the back end of November after the Halloween kind of run in through November, it was starting to drop. People was coming and going, yeah, we got a little bit, not too much. But now you see a massive spike again. It's up there, and you can see that energy. And I expect that to carry on up until June time, and then you'll see it start to drop, and until another break in August.
I must admit, I agree with you. I do think that it's part. I mean, I call it overfishing, but it's like with somewhere like East Drive. It's getting so used so much that the activity does seem to have tailed off. But then again, it's one of those things, isn't it? You can look at the evidence, and I guess your training in your previous life as a police officer, you've learnt to take evidence, analyse the evidence, interpret the evidence. That's one of the things that police officers are trained to do, and you can look at things from an analytical perspective. We'll never know the answer.
No. And that's the beauty. That's the beauty.
Exactly. That is the beauty.
It is guesswork.
It's opinions and guesswork, and nobody will ever be an expert, and nobody will ever know the true answers until they're dead, really. But with things like East Drive, it does also sometimes seem to be, if the spirits that are there know the person because they're there regularly, they tend to seem to want to make more of an appearance, or the time of year. You're right, or whether it's there's all these other things that you can factor in. But I do think it's interesting. But then again, the conversation I was having with somebody on Facebook recently was they were saying, well, spirits need energy, people bring energy, so why do you think it's too many investigations? And I said it depends on the type of energy, because if you've got people who they do bring energy, but then again it's how much energy does the spirit expend
Yeah.
trying to
And-
communicate compared to
and
what you're
types
giving
of
them,
energy?
and the
What
type
types
of
of
energy.
public events are obviously, is very different to energies that you bring on a private investigation.
Yeah.
So a private investigation, you know exactly what you'll bring in,
Yeah.
and you know that every team member will bring that same kind of energy. Whereas
Yeah.
on a public event that is done week in, week out of the village and other locations, such as East Drive, you just don't know what people are bringing. Whether they've had a cheeky drink before they've come into this location, whether they're not taking it serious, whether they have had a bad experience themselves and bringing in a really darker energy in. You just don't know what's going in there. And if there are ghost spirits out there that were living people, and just like you are in life, you are intimidated by certain individuals. If they're bringing in an energy that they're going to be intimidated by, them spirits will disappear.
Yep.
And they won't come back until they feel comfortable again. That's just the way the world works. And if that works in life, then surely that's going to work in death.
Exactly what I say. I tend to. It's like when you bring up the sort of I don't believe in demons. I don't think negative things happening. There's a lot of people. It's up to you what you believe. I'm not knocking anyone's belief. My personal belief is that a lot of the bad juju energies that people experience are those that were nasty people in life.
That's right.
And they're still nasty people in death. They're not going to change personality. So, and I've had this conversation with a lot of people who either say similar things to me or have a completely different opinion. That's fine. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion. Something I was reading this morning on Facebook, actually, before we spoke, it was somebody who said that they're a born-again Christian, and I'm not knocking their beliefs, but they believe that any spirit that's capable of communicating is unclean and therefore has an ulterior motive. A bit like those people who, when you say that it's a child, no, it's not a child, it's a demonic spirit masquerading as a child. So everyone has an opinion, and that's great. But I agree, if you've got a spirit that was shy in life, who say they're not going to be shy in death? There's no. Right. I'm hoping to come back looking like Marilyn Monroe, but it probably won't happen.
Well, I mean, one of the things is on the same subject is when a lot of people, when they come on investigations, and they will be all kind of love and light, and you've got to be respectful, and you've got to speak and yes please and no thank you, and be very polite to the spirits, which I completely agree with. You have to start off like that. You have to be polite, because that's just the way we are as human beings. That's just the way I am. I'm polite to people. But I'm at heart, and when it gets to the nitty gritty, I'm a paranormal investigator, and I'm there to experience activity. No matter how I get it, I don't really care how I get it, as long as I get it. So if I've got a spirit there that's a grumpy old man, and I was going to swear then, but I wasn't.
No, you can. It's all right. The show does actually genuinely have an adult warning on it.
Well, so if I've got a grumpy old bastard that's
there,
and he doesn't want to speak to anybody, and I'm there going, come on, come and do something for us. Come and move this chair for me. Come on, please. We don't mean you any harm. This bloke's going to be going, you know what, I'm not doing this. But as soon as I start getting all rough and tumble with him, and I don't believe you're there, come on, come and move this chair, I don't believe you're there, you can't do anything, getting a bit more kind of to his level, things will start happening. And then you get flack for not being respectful. But if that guy, that's not his fault. He's not a demon, he's not an evil spirit. He's just a grumpy old bastard that was there in life, and that's what he's like. That's what he's like in death.
I think it's like you say. It depends. If you're respectful to begin with, sometimes I've only ever got disrespectful when it's a spirit that was a spirit that was picking on women in this fort. I got asked, the group I was with, they'd sent the medium. I wasn't particularly impressed with him. He was a bit too of a show medium, but he'd sent this one young guy off into this one room where this spirit, every time you walk past it, it would thump women in the chest. That's the only like the solar plexus. And I was getting a bit bored with this show this medium was putting on, so I said, "Oh, can I go and help him in that room?" And I did. He said, "Can you smell that?" And it was like sweat and oil smell. It was very strange. Anyway, I could feel this spirit, and the temperature in the room kept changing, and you're in an old fort, and I did start I was being quite rude to this spirit, and asking him why he hated women, but not in a nice way. And it's not his fault that he's so inadequate. His girlfriend went off and slept with someone else, and things like that. Because it just seemed right. Because he was a bully. He was bullying women.
And again, it's a trigger to get a response.
And in fact, it was a woman saying that to him, and he pretended, and he backed off. You could feel it, the room change.
Yeah.
But I don't do that all the time, because, sometimes it is a case of cajoling them out when they're shy, and especially when there's a child.
That's right.
Like
if you start coming in at that level, but then you talk to a child, you'll never get anything, because they'll just shy away.
Exactly.
You've got to look at it. And look at what the history of the place. Is there likely to be children there? Is there likely to be older people there? And then kind of use that as a trigger. And I always say to people, if you're not getting anything after 10 minutes, just change your approach. If you're calling out, change your approach. As if you talk to a child, or talk to an older person, or talk to someone that's grumpy, or maybe change it up. It might be someone that just doesn't like speaking to women or like speaking to men. Change it up all the time to see what works best.
Yeah. No, I agree. One of my best experiences of like a disembodied voice was at an American air traffic control tower in Bury St Edmunds, when we had still had the lights on. My friend was looking at the map of bombing stations, and she was saying, why are they all in East Anglia? And I was explaining to her the bombing missions that the Americans ran during World War II, and why. And that was my knowledge of history that promoted a trigger. We heard a voice behind us, an American accent, go, yep.
Wow.
Now, we did check there was no one else in the building with us. Everyone else was in the other hut. We ran around the building. There was no one. And we both heard. Unfortunately, we didn't have our recorders going, because we weren't actually investigating at that point. We were just looking around with the lights on to get our bearings. And so that's where sometimes when people sort of say knowing history of a place is bad, I think it is, because if you go in there and you can come going with preconceived ideas, but you can also target things that are going to be specific. So the fact that I knew why the Americans put most of their bases in East Anglia, and I could explain it because of the bombing runs that they were doing, that was the trigger to make one of them sort of basically say yep. And it was things like that. Whereas, and also, if I knew that the aircraft that was at something was, I don't know, B-17 Flying Fortress, I'm not going to start asking them if they've flown a Spitfire before. But I agree with you. I think there's respect, and then there's using what you've got to gain a reaction. That's not necessarily being disrespectful, because the grumpy old git is going to probably respond. He's not going to have responded to someone. We all know these kind of people. If you're nice to them, they don't respond. But if you talk to them the way they talk to you, they must respect it in a way.
Yeah. That's right, yeah.
So, the village itself, it's not actually a village, is it?
No. It was got its name through the nightclub. Right. It was a nightclub there from 1973 to 2001, and it was called the Village Nightclub. So that's where it's got its name, the Village, and the current owners that purchased it in 2014 just kept the name as the Village, because everyone knows it as the Village building. So it's not actually a video. We have had somebody turn up once for an investigation, and they looked and they said, well, where's all the houses? Where is everything? And they expected it to be literally a village of houses that was going around, but they don't expect it to be what it actually is.
But it was also a slaughterhouse at one point?
It was originally built for a malt house. Right. And part of the building was leased out to be a slaughterhouse, an unofficial slaughterhouse. Now, but that didn't last very long. The authorities got hold of what they was doing, and that didn't last very long. So the building was built in 1873, and the slaughterhouse only lasted until it didn't even last to the 1880s. So that was quickly closed down, and it carried on as a malt house.
Right. And
then the council took over in the 1950s, and they leased it out to Mansfield Brewery, and then they used it as part of the brewery headquarters. And then in the 1970s, it was turned into the nightclub. And the nightclub in its heyday held 3,500 people per night.
Blimey.
That's how big that place is. It looks really small from the outside, but it is like a TARDIS. It just dropped down below street level, so a lot of people see it for being this small kind of barn-shaped building. But then when you actually go in, it drops down a level. They can see how it opens up. But it is an amazing building.
Yeah, and I mean, if people Googled you, one of the things they'd find is an article that I think it was the Daily Mail I saw it in. You'd been doing an investigation of the place, and when you went back and looked at the CCTV, there's loads of mists kind of floating around in front of the camera.
Yeah, well, what happened was it was April the 5th, 2015, and 2016, April the 5th, 2016, and there was a group in that had hired the place, and they went into what is known as Area 2, which is probably one of the most active areas in the village, and they went right down the far end of the area, and so you couldn't see them on CCTV; they were out of shot. But then all of a sudden, I'm sat up in the briefing room watching the CCTV. This mist came out. I always describe it as a sandstorm. It came across the floor, almost like waves of sand going across the floor. Now in there, it's a carpeted kind of artificial grass that is in there, and it's made up as a Nerf arena for the children. So this kind of wave of sand came across the floor, and then it shot up into the air and started swirling around the room. Now it looked as though the place was on fire. It really, if you watch the CCTV footage, it looked as though the place was on fire with this smoke. So I ran down there, and there is nothing there. There's nothing there. This group's still doing their vigil down the bottom end of the room, and they couldn't see anything. We couldn't see anything. You could only see it on the CCTV camera on the infrared. So we've had that happened day and night. This mist kept coming, swirling around all different directions. It even formed into almost like a body and followed people around. And we had an experiment at one point where someone would go down there, walk around the pillars that are in there, and this mist would follow them around through the pillars. But that lasted from the 5th of April through to the 5th of August 2016, and then it just disappeared. And it has never returned. We've still not got it to this day. Same cameras there, same conditions, and this mist has never returned, and we still don't know to this day what it is. Now, we've had hundreds of theories, and I'm not saying one of these theories isn't correct, because they possibly could be. That I strongly believe there may be a scientific explanation for this, but to this day I've still not found it. Because every explanation, such as is it humidity, is it temperature change, is it airflow, we've counteracted with experiments of, well, it couldn't be that because of. You know, there's always something that we can say, well, it's not that because of this, or not that because of that. So I still can't put down 100% of what caused that at all, and it's never returned. I wish it would. I wish it would return, just so we can investigate it a little bit more. But it is really strange, and there is no airflow down there, such. And the doors that are all down there are all made of like thin bamboo shoots, so the airflow goes through the doors anyway. So it's not as if there's you open a door, or, you know, when you open a window at home and it's suddenly you can feel the air temperature change and that gust of wind. Yeah, you don't get that in the village because it's all open plan. The village, the doors are all kind of the air flows through them, so even if you open a door, it doesn't affect it. And nothing has changed in them nearly 2 years since it disappeared. So we don't know. We don't know what it was. We still don't know.
But one of the connections that was possibly made of what it could have been was what the site was before the village was built there. And one of the things, and I don't know, you'd know more about the area than I do. I've never actually been. Is there was supposed to be in the site of an old barn, and there was tunnels from nearby Newstead Abbey. So that's the spooky connection here, Newstead Abbey. That during the dissolution of the monasteries that I talked about before you came on air with us, there was I think it was 6 or 7 monks were meant to have escaped down the tunnels to the barn, and when the authorities found them in the barn, they tortured them with them inside.
That's right. Yeah. So that's where the theory goes. We know exactly where this tunnel would have come out within the village. We know exactly where that would be. and the tunnels would have connected through to Newstead Abbey. It would have also connected to a pub called the Hut, which is across the road from Newstead Abbey. And we believe that there was a tunnel that connected with St Peter's Church, which is about 500 yards away from the village.
Right.
And the story goes that there were 7 monks that was hiding from the soldiers at the time. The soldiers got wind of what was happening, and instead of going in the barn and arresting them, they just simply burnt the barn down. And there were 7 monks that perished in there. Now, we don't know exactly where they would have been hiding, because we believe the barn stretched the whole of Area 2 of the village. And behind it would have been a lot of farmland. Now, there is an actual river that runs directly underneath the village, the River Morn. And we know the barn would have been slightly adjacent to the river, so we can figure out exactly where this barn started and finished, and exactly what side of the river it would have been on. And we know where the entrance to this tunnel would have been. But yeah, so is this mist part of the fire of the barn? Is it the spirits of these monks that have come back? And a lot of people do come in and smell smoke when they go down there. Right. When I don't, I'll be honest, I don't smell smoke, and I always say, is it part of suggestion, because people have seen this story? Have they seen this story of the mist, and putting 2 together? But it's a very interesting one, just to know whether it is the monks or not. And like you say, it's a really good connection to Newstead Abbey, which is what I've said before. It's again somewhere that I work with, one of my locations, and it's also where I had my first experience, which we talked about earlier in the show.
We did, and we also talked about that sometimes, when we talked about this off air, actually, sometimes things are meant to be.
Yeah,
and it does seem to be. It's come full circle.
That's right. Yeah, and it's kind of, we've got this link now of locations that I work with that are all seem to be spookily connected, because the village at that time, with this barn being there when it was burned down, would have been part of Sherwood Forest. So, and that's another location that I investigate, which is Sherwood Forest. And obviously Sherwood Forest has got links with Nottingham Castle. Nottingham Castle's got links with the Brewhouse Yard. And all those of the Nottingham Castle and Woollerton Hall are linked by a tunnel. So all of these locations that I do, every single one, are connected in some way, shape or form. They're all connected by some story. You can have a timeline of events of the connection.
Maybe you're the connection.
Well, yeah. I have been told that before, actually. I've been told that even to the point where, and it's kind of going off sidetrack a little bit, but when I spent 5 days at 30 East Drive, and didn't really find much there. Little bits and bobs happened. Nothing really happened there. And then I went back to the village, and somebody came in and was picking up on a monk. It was a medium. They were picking up on a monk downstairs, and she came up and spoke to me, and she said, "We're picking up on monks." And I said, "Oh yeah, that will be downtown." And I started telling her the story. She said, "No, it's nothing to do with that. You've just been to 30 East Drive, and that's where the same has come from." So again, it was like, okay, now she didn't know that I'd been there. Whether she put 2 and 2 together with me being a ghost hunter, and 30 East Drive was very popular at the time.
Possibly, yeah.
I don't know. But then she turned around and said, "You are a link to this, and there is lots of locations that you are a link for these spirits. Not just me, but my team." And we've picked up, no matter where we go, we tend to pick up on the same kind of activity, same kind of spirits coming through, which is spookily kind of weird. And we've all picked up on it, that there's something kind of connecting us and the locations of where we go, which is strange.
So has the village ever scared you?
Yes, it has, but not as in activity-wise. Things that have happened activity-wise, I'm always very, very intrigued. And that's normally because activity happens when there's quite a group of people there. Now, the only time it really does mess with my head and freak me out a little bit is at the end of the night, and it happens on every investigation. I will have to do it tonight as well and tomorrow. When everybody leaves at 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, I have to then go round and check all the fire doors on my own. Now, I can normally do that fine. I can go around any location in the dark, torchlight, doesn't really affect me. But there are times when I'm walking around the village, if I let it get in my head and I start thinking about, right, what have they picked up on, what what activity we have here, then I have two choices. I quickly check the fire doors, or I just don't bother.
Oh.
There are times where I've just gone round area 1, gone into area 2, looked in the big room of area 2, and gone, you know what, I'm not putting myself in that situation, and I've walked away. Now, I've been everywhere, the most haunted places there is, and there is not one place that I have done that in other than the village, and refused to go down there, just because it's got, and I think it is psychological. It's got in my head. It's played with my head, and they're on my own. People have had a really good night, lots of activity. They've been sharing stories, and sharing stories with me, and I've gone down there and bottled it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, it's nice to know that even a big tough ghost hunter like yourself gets scared occasionally.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, get spooked.
Well, is there anything coming up that you want to mention on air?
Well, I've personally got lots of things coming up. We've got lots of events coming up for Haunted Events UK. Most of them are sold out. But we've got Woollerton and Newstead Abbey, and we've got Brewhouse Yard on the 9th of February that we have got spaces for. 9th of February. We have got village investigations that I will be investigating with you. Normally I'm just sat up in the briefing room watching CCTV, but these are actually Haunted Events UK ones where I'll be coming down with you. So we've got those coming up on the 16th of March and the 8th of June, where we've got places free as well. And then I think everything else is sold out than those. But we've got lots of projects coming up throughout the year, so we're looking at doing more lives with Haunted Live. And then obviously I've got some other projects that are in the pipeline at the minute with a few celebs, maybe a TV show that we're looking at the minute. So hopefully that will come off, that I will announce as and when I can, really. So
anyone who wants to see what you've got coming up, just go to your official Lee Roberts Facebook page. Official Lee Roberts, or you can go on the website officialleeroberts.com, and there are links there to the events as well, and you'll go on the Facebook page, or if you're on Twitter at Mr. Lee Roberts, you can follow me on there. It's all kind of interlinked. We share everything on there that what we're up to, and take part. I think we've got a Haunted Live event coming up as well in April, where the Haunted Live lads will be running. Unfortunately, I won't be there because I'm double booked myself. But the Haunted Live will be going to Bosworth Hall, which is we did it on Halloween night last year, which is a fantastic location. I think that's going to be announced next week. So people that want to go to that can go and join the other part of the team and get involved. Awesome. So that's about it, I think. Well, thanks ever so much for your time today, Lee. Obviously, we've got about 6 more shows now we're going to have to book into the diary. You talked yourself into them, mate. You did talk yourself in. I know my company's good, but even I'm a bit flattered you want to do 6 more. You just want to use my history knowledge, don't you? So that's it. Well, I mean, my theory is I've been told that I'm quite kind of ignorant towards the history of it. But I've been working, like I said, I've been working at Woollerton Hall since 2006. But I can go into there and someone can ask me a question and I've not got a clue. But my theory is I go into it as it's my first investigation every time, so I don't like to look into the history. But it's great when I do speak to people that have done a bit of research, people that work there, people such as yourself that got a kind of a buzz for the history. Yeah. Because it does learn me more. History is just not my thing, but it's great to kind of look into it. So when we do the Woollerton Hall show or whatever we do, you can do a bit of research, you can learn me at the same time. I expect a free visit to Woollerton Hall for this. Well, anytime, yeah. You can come on any of the locations. Oh, thank you. Well, thanks ever so much for your time. If anyone wants to go and check out what Lee's doing, you've got Haunted Events UK. If you go in Haunted Magazine, they always talk about the Haunted Live events, and you've got Lee's official Facebook page. I won't let you in on too many of the other shows we've got coming up, but don't forget that Parasearch has shows on every single night of the week, and you can also go and catch them on Spreaker and YouTube. And all that leaves me to say is thanks for listening, have a good evening, sleep tight, and don't worry too much about things that go bump in the night.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.